What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Cursed Urban. And I'm here on the tent again, staying warm. Got the heater on. Calm night out. And I'm just back again because you guys seem to really like the scary stories. So, figured that we would do another round of scary stories tonight. Once again, I'm back out in the tent. It is a nice, crisp winter evening, but I am super hot. I got, like I said, my little space heater on and my propane space heater, and it works almost too good, but I'll take it. I'd rather have it work too good than not good enough. Anyways, let's not delay. Let's get into the stories today. I have 2 stories for you. Actually, I might have 3. See how we're doing on time. The first one is from an actual close friend of mine, and it's a Bigfoot story. And the second one is actually one of my stories of something that happened to me. So, that being said, let's get into it. Okay, so this story starts out with my good friend Garrett. And him and his family had a tradition of camping every year in the same campground. And that's right down in central Illinois, right outside one of the major state forests. He would go down there with him, his mom and dad, his brother, a few cousins, uncle, everyone, the whole gang would go down there. Annual tradition. So they would go, and it was tent camping only. No cabins or anything like that. So just tents. And yeah, it was pretty fun. And as they got older, the camp kind of separated between, the adults and then the younger. Well, when this took place, they were older. Brothers and cousins and everything. So, this is the middle of summer. I believe they went down there around July. So, Garrett and his family, they get all packed up, and they head on down. Just like all the 20-something odd summers that came before this, and they get down to the campsite, just as they imagined. They meet all their family down there, their, relatives, find their camping spots, and, it kind of, once again, divides. The adults are staying kind of with the adults, and the younger people are staying kind of with the younger people. So, it's Garrett and his brother, and 2 other cousins. Now, I forget the name of their 2 cousins, so I'll just refer to them as the cousins. And then Garrett's brother is Trent. So Garrett and Trent are, sharing a tent, and then the cousins, they each have their own tent, 1 and 1. So it's just kind of them staying. They're sharing 2 camping spots that are right next to each other, side by side, both these camping spots. And the trip starts off like normal, like nothing crazy, nothing I can't say, and, it was so weird they instantly had a bad feeling. Nothing like that. It was business as usual. It was a good time. It was a good time to see everybody, since this was usually the only time of year they got to see each other, since they lived kind of far apart. And, they all had work then. They were all in their 20s at this point. And so the first day goes by. They hang out, they have fun, they have a few drinks, drive their rental golf cart around the property, go swimming, fishing, everything you can kind of think of. And it's good. They go to bed that night, sleep, wake up early the next day, go out, and Garrett's dad makes them all breakfast. He's kind of famous for this. He makes them all a huge breakfast, pancakes over the fire, bacon, hash browns from, he grates his own potatoes, makes hash browns. He makes it all over the fire. So it's kind of like a tradition. They all know that he's in charge of breakfast for, the first morning that they're there. So, they go and enjoy their breakfast. And after that, they all, once again, kind of split off. I know the adults were doing a little bit of, having a few early morning cocktails, just enjoying themselves. And then Garrett and Trent and their cousins go off. And they decide to hike. Because like I said, this is right outside. This campground is right outside of one of our big state forests here in Illinois. They go off and they hike, and really nice place. Really nice place. Really tall, evergreen trees, and it's just very nice. Everything's in full. It's the middle of summer, so all the leaves are out, all the flowers are out, animals are out. They can kind of hear and smell everything, and it's just a good day. And the bugs aren't even too bad then either. They didn't have too many problems with mosquitoes. So they're just walking down this trail, and the trail was through this patch of evergreens. So the long needled ones, I forget the actual name for them, but it was walking down like a nice, almost like carpeted path, really, really soft to walk down it. And they walk down this path, and it kind of branches off. It branches off. One way leads to a very sharp bend and around, and the other path leads deeper into the forest. So they're like, well, at the time they thought both of them led, to different spots in the forest, but they decide to check out the left path first. And they go out there. They walk down around this really sharp bend, almost a 90-degree bend, and they walk out there, and it just ends in kind of like a field, and kind of like a clearing. And, it's, nothing really seemed off about it at first. They just kind of walked around, just took it in, but nothing really seemed off about this place. And of course they weren't really looking for anything, off about this place either. There's nothing. They didn't go out in this spot and be like, oh, I'm in a haunted forest or anything. It wasn't creepy or anything. So that's the last thing they were thinking of. But they're exploring this meadow. You're just walking around, enjoying the fresh air out from the forest. And then Garrett trips over something. Like he trips over something on the ground. He thinks it's a tree root at first. He's like, oh, I tripped over a tree root. And then he looks, and he notices like the trees from the forest are very, very far away. So he quickly realizes like it's not that. It's not a tree root. And looks down. When he sees sticking out of the ground about this far is, he can't really tell. It's kind of like brownish gray, like light gray kind of. He like looks around, and at first he dismisses it. He's like, whatever, because it's one of those things you stub your toe, you're like, oh. But when he looked down and examined it for a few seconds, something stuck out to him. Something caught his attention enough that he went back and wanted to take a second look. So he takes a couple steps back, and he looks down, and what he sees sticking out of the ground is, like I said, about this far, is a very slender piece that ends in like kind of a blunt point. He's like, that's really weird. What is that? And he kicks it. It's very hard. It feels almost like a rock. And he's looking at it. He reaches down. He touches it. And when he touches it, that's when he puts it together. He's like, I know exactly what that is. Like, that's a bone. That is definitely a bone. So he calls over to his brother and his cousins, like, hey, come here, check this out. Come over. They see, looking at it, like, oh yeah, that's a bone for sure. It seems like it's probably a bone from a rib cage. Like, what kind of animal has a rib cage that big? And they're like, well, deer don't, unless this is like some world record setting deer, but deer don't have that. And we're in Illinois, like we don't have black bear around here. We don't, we have coyotes, we have deer. If you want to get into southern Illinois, which they are not in southern Illinois, they have boar every now and then. They have nothing that lives in the forest that could be this. So they're very puzzled about this, and they start thinking, they're like, all right, what could this be? They try and break it down, like, all right, what could this be? Could this be like this? Could it be that? I'm like, no. And then one of the cousins stops and he looks around, notices like where he's at. It's like a field. Like, all right, a field, a meadow. What could have been out here? It's like, I bet it's a cow. I bet it was a cow rib cage. Because this is like, it's obviously been consumed by the earth. It's not a new thing at all. It's old, it's dirty. So he's like, guys, I bet this used to be like a cattle. Like, people used to have cattle out here. It's like it's perfect for them, the middle of all these trees, it's just like this clearing. I bet that's exactly what it is. It's, a cow. Everybody's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And they look at it and how old it is and how like dirty and like chipped the bones are. Like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That was the end of it. That was absolutely the end of it. They went back. They continued on their way. Like I said, a hike in a beautiful forest. Had a great time. So later that day, they come back to the camp, and it's in the evening. They all fixed themselves some food. I think they had burgers, and their parents were having something else, something not burgers, but the brothers and the cousins, they had burgers and just a real simple, quick dinner. They sit around after that. They decide to make a bonfire. So they find some like pallets and stuff, and that they talk. Well, they find like the pallets out by the garbage, and they go and they talk to the camp, the main officer, like, hey, like, can we burn these pallets? And they're like, oh, you're not supposed to, but we are throwing them out, and I ain't looking. So they grab these pallets, they bring them back to their campsite, build a huge bonfire, huge. And all these guys are, Garrett's brother Trent and the two cousins, they're all drinking. They're all drinking. Garrett's taking it pretty easy, he had a big weekend, so to speak, a few weeks before. So he's like, you know what, I need to lay off. I need to take it easy. I don't want to feel like crap this entire trip. And so he's got a beer. He's kind of nursing, he's not doing anything crazy, but his brother and his cousins are taking shots and, this and that. And like, come on, Garrett, drink with us. And like, no, I'm good. So they're sitting around. They're just enjoying this bonfire and drinking. And eventually, those three, aside from Garrett, pass out. Because they're all sitting in like these chairs, these beach chairs they stole from by the pool. So they're like the kind of lounge chairs that lay back. And they all pass out by the fire, leaving Garrett just sitting there, just kind of hanging out, still with his beer, scrolling on his phone a little bit. And yeah, he's just kind of relaxing. But that is when the first odd thing of the weekend happens. Garrett's sitting there and he's relaxing. And all of a sudden he hears a noise. And he hears it come from the forest, the big forest that's right by this campsite. He hears it come from the forest and he's like, what is that? It's like a growl, kind of like a howl. It's like tight. He's never heard anything like it before. ever. And he's like, that's really weird. Like, what could that be? And it's very quiet at first. It's not, it's not very loud. It's just very, like, almost muted. This growl, howl, whatever it may be. And it stops just as quickly as it began. So he's sitting there and he's like, what was that? What is that? He's sitting there and he's thinking, he's like, what is it? What could that have been? And then he hears it again, this time louder, way louder. Just this very guttural, throaty type yell coming from the forest. And it sets him on edge. Like, he hears this and he's like, I've never heard anything like that. He's like, what could that be? And he's going through everything in his head again. A bear? No, there's no bear here. It could be like, a fox. No, it's not high pitched enough. Because Garrett also has worked with wildlife his entire life. So he's very adept at knowing, like, the different sounds and what to look for. Because he's worked in pet stores. He's volunteered at, like, wildlife rehabilitation center, everything. So it's not like he's new to this stuff. It's not like, this is the first time he's heard any of this stuff. It's not new. But he's never heard anything like this, not even close. And he sits there and it only does it once. That's it. Only does it once. And, he's like, whatever. That's weird. And he sits up, and he's always thinking about this for a good portion of the night, trying to place this. But eventually, the shock of it kind of wears off. It's not as prevalent as it was when he first heard it. And he starts getting a little bit tired, and he retires to his tent for the evening. Well, the next morning he wakes up, they have breakfast, and while they're sitting there having breakfast, he tells his whole family about this. He's like, did you guys hear that, like, howl or whatever, like that noise last night? And his mom's like, I heard something, but I thought it was your father snoring. And, like, his brother and the cousins, they're like, oh, we didn't hear anything. It's like, well, that's obvious. You were passed out drunk. So, yeah, so he's like, he tried to describe it, and like, then they, of course, went through the same options. Oh, could it be, this, that, that? No. So, yeah, nothing was really concluded that day or that morning. Well, day goes by, and they decide to go hiking through the forest again. They hit the trails, and they go the same route, and end up back in this field. And where he's at, he can hear people in the campsite. And even though it's kind of far away, there's like some people some people screaming, like, at the, on the water slide or something. It doesn't matter. Like, he could hear people over there, just very faintly. So they're standing in the field again, hanging out. And he can just very, very faintly hear, like, these people from the water park. And he's like, I think that sound, that noise that I heard, came from right here. Just judging the distance. So he's like, I think it came from this, like, right here. Right in this meadow. It's like, okay. And he brings us, up to his brother and his cousins again. And, like, all right, that's really weird. Well, we're not drinking tonight, so, we'll sit around and we'll listen and see if we hear anything together. So, go back to the camp, or they continue hiking for, an hour, head back to the camp. Once again, have some dinner, and steal some more pallets from the trash, build another fire. And true to their word, they decided not to drink that night because they had a little bit too much before, and the cousins were a little bit older. Garrett's brother was a little bit older, and they just realized they did not handle it as well as they used to. So they're still having a beer, but nothing Nothing crazy. So they're all sitting there, and again, the same exact situation happens as the night previously. They hear this very low howling noise. And they're like, what? And Garrett's like, dude, that's what I was talking about. That is what I was talking about. And they're all exchanging looks like what is that? Like, what the is that? And none of them know. None of them have any idea. But now they're like, okay, like, they never doubted Garrett. They never, he's not the type of guy to make stuff up like this. So it's not like they were like, oh, that didn't happen, man. Like, you were just hearing things. Or like, so they believed it, but they didn't understand what it, like, how, like serious the sound was until he explained it. And, so they're sitting there, and once again, it starts out quietly, and then again, an extremely loud howl, just like he heard, if not louder, like he heard the night before. And they all sit up. They're all like, what is that? And then right after that again, and this time it sounded more like a scream, and it sounded like something got attacked. They heard a very, very high-pitched scream. It sounded like a deer being attacked, or maybe a fox being attacked. So this howl happened, followed right by a scream. Like whatever creature owned this howling noise attacked something else. And they all just exchange looks, and they're like, there's no way, dude. There's no way. We have no idea what that is. Like, maybe it's a mountain lion. Like, maybe a mountain lion is, made its way into Illinois. Or a bobcat. And Garrett, having heard both a mountain lion and a bobcat in person, he's like, no. He's like, it's way too low. Like, the sound is way too low. Like, those cats have a very high-pitched noise. A high-pitched call. And like, dude, that's weird. But here's the thing. Where Garrett was interested, the other three were kind of a little bit more unsettled by this. They didn't feel safe. So the next day they were leaving. So they decided, you know what, let's pack up tonight. Let's sleep in our cars. That's what they're like. We don't want to be out here with this thing. Garrett's like, no, come on. Let's see what it is. Because, like, Garrett, loving wildlife, he wanted to know. And they're like, no, dude, I don't like this. I got a bad feeling. So that's exactly what they did. They packed up, put all their stuff in their cars, and, Garrett slept. Well, he didn't sleep. He stayed out by the fire, got himself a nice stack of wood, and just sat out by the fire. He's like, I'm going to listen, see if I hear something. Well, they go to their cars, and they go to sleep. And Garrett's sitting out there by himself. He's not hearing anything. He thinks it's probably over. Whatever it was is gone. He's not hearing anything. Whatever. It was cool, but... And he starts dozing off. Starts closing his eyes, putting his head back. Then he hears something hit the ground beside of him. He's like, what is that? And looking around. He doesn't see anything. And like, whatever. Starts dozing off again, putting his head back. Here's something else hit the ground. He's like, what is that? He's looking around. He's like, dude, that's... He's like, what is going on? Then he hears it again. He's like, okay, it's got to be like some kids at the camp, like, playing a trick on me or something, And then, like, again, he hears, But out of the corner of his eye, he sees something this time. And he looks just in time to see a little rock. It's about this big. Hit the ground, kind of bounce before it stopped. He's like, that's weird. And he looked at the direction it was coming from, and it was the trees. And he's sitting there, and he's like, well, what would come from the trees? He had a flashlight on him, though, and he shines his flashlight into the trees. Doesn't see anything. He's like, that's really odd. Like, maybe if it was an acorn or something else, like, sure. So he sits there, and he's like trying to figure out, like, what is this? Here's it again. And this time the rock lands right by him and rolls forward a little bit. He's like, all right, there's something there. And he goes, grabs his light, he walks back by the forest. He's looking around. Doesn't see anything. Sees nothing. At this point, he's starting to get a little bit nervous. And rightfully so, who could blame him? He's starting to get a little bit nervous. And so he throws some more wood on the fire, hoping to keep whatever it is away. Hopefully it's scared of fires. And that's when he hears the next noise. And that is a knock on the trees. This time it occurs much deeper, much further away, kind of halfway between the meadow and where his campsite is. It seems like it happens right in between the two. He hears like something like what he described as something hitting trees with like a log. Just boom, boom, boom. So it was in very rapid succession. Did like 3 or 4 times. But then he didn't hear it after that at all. So, rest of the night goes by uneventful. He finally gets to sleep about 4 a.m. Sleeps for a few hours. Gets up. They have their breakfast. They say their goodbyes. They all pack up the car and head home. Head back to their respective areas. And yeah, Garrett's kind of thinking about this, kind of mulling it over in his head. And he's like, all right, what is that? What could I have seen? What could I have, And of course, he filled in everybody like, this is what happened when you guys went to sleep. And they're like, that's really odd. And they all chalked it up to the same thing. Like, it has to be like kids playing tricks on you. At least the rocks part. And Garrett's like, yeah, that's probably it. That really is probably it. I'm probably overthinking this whole thing. So, they get back. A few days pass. And they were on a long weekend. A few days pass. Kind of, forget about the whole thing. Not forget, but, it's not as important. And eventually, work week comes and Garrett goes back to work. So he goes into work and he's talking to everybody. He gets to work, he's doing his job, he works in a warehouse, and kind of, is like one of the 2 warehouse workers. A very, very chill job and kind of go at your own pace type thing. He's doing work. They all break for lunch and they all sitting in the office having lunch, cracking jokes. The boss is there, manager, his other coworkers. It's a very like tight knit group. It's a small group, but a very tight knit group. And one of them asked, like, "Oh, hey Garrett, how'd your camping trip go?" He's like, "Oh, it was great. It was great to see my cousins and my uncle and aunt and this and that and yeah, so on and so forth." He's like, "But the weirdest thing happened." And that's when he went into like, oh, I heard these weird animal noises, like this rock thing happened, like, and all of them like, wow, that's really odd. And they do the same thing. Well, what could it have been? Do you think it was a bear? Do you think it was like this and that? Of course, no, I don't know. But his boss is sitting there, just sitting like that, is really soaking up every single word that Garrett is saying. He's sitting there like really absorbing it. And he's like, Garrett, well, once he's done, telling the story. He's like, Garrett, how much do you know about Bigfoot? I don't know. I know nothing. I know less than nothing. Other than, hearing, because everybody's heard about Bigfoot. And he's like, let me play you something. Takes Garrett over the computer, boots up YouTube, and plays the infamous Ohio Howl clip for Garrett. He's like, Garrett, I want you to tell me if this is what you heard. And he played it. And Garrett heard it and just stopped. He's like, that is identical to what I heard out there. 100% identical. And his boss is like, well, that's supposed to be a Bigfoot. He's like, you said he got rocks thrown at you? He's like, yeah. He's like, Bigfoot does that. You said you heard knocks on the tree? He's like, yeah, I did. He does that too. Everything you experienced was classic Bigfoot signs. And here it's like, no way. No way. And then sure enough, he looked up the area he was camping in, especially, was a very well-known Bigfoot hotspot. So, yeah. After that, I think that was actually the final time they went camping at that spot, and they switched states to go to somewhere else. Not because of that encounter or anything, just because they just like to switch things up. They went there for however long, and it's time for somewhere new. So Garrett never went back, and the mystery remains. But when he first told me that story, I was kind of skeptical, but like, Garrett's not the type of person to make that stuff up. He wouldn't just sit there and, just like, oh, I'm going to concoct a story about Bigfoot, especially since he'd never heard that before. And he didn't hear that audio clip until after and identified it immediately. So draw your own conclusions, but maybe I'm biased, but I believe him. All right, just getting a little stretched out. And we're headed into our second story of the evening. And this is one of my stories. Encounter with a UFO that I had about 10 years ago. About 10, 12 years ago or so. And I still remember it very clearly. Very, very clearly. So, it was really late one night. Of course, as every story starts, it was very dark, very late at night. And I was driving around with two of my friends. We'll call them, just because I don't know if they want me to use their names, Ryan and Karl. And I'm driving around with, Ryan and Karl, and we're in Ryan's car. He had just, an older Honda, like a 96, 97 Honda. I had a sunroof, everything. And we're driving. We're just, cruising around town. Just, nothing to do. Really nothing to do. We were sitting at Karl's house for a while. Just sitting in the backyard like, all right, another boring night. Like, what are we going to do? And that's when Ryan suggests, like, oh, let's just go cruise. Like, let's just go, cruise, burn some gas, which, whatever. Like, all right, that's fine. That's what we did. So we were a little ways out from where we live, because Ryan, Karl, and I lived very close to each other in like two neighboring cities. And we get a little bit farther out than from where we live. And just, just by driving, we probably drive, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes from where we live. And so we're cruising, and we're in like the middle of the city. Not the middle of the city, but we're in the city, There's still plenty of lights, street lights, everything. But there's barely any traffic on the road. Like I said, it is like, at this point, it's like, I think it was like 2 a.m. at this point. And we're just cruising. And all of a sudden, we, out of the corner of our eyes, we all notice this almost collectively. We see this big shape hovering about 30 or 40 feet above the tree line. Like, it was very, very low to the ground. We got a really good look at this thing. We're looking up and we see this thing. We're like, what is that? And it's just this giant black craft. And it's got a few flashing lights on it. And in the middle is like a circle. And we all see this, which makes me so happy, because if it would have just been me that night, nobody would have believed me. But we all saw this together. And we look up and we just see this thing, and it's moving silently. Silently right above the trees. And we see it flying over the trees, because at first we thought it's a helicopter. We're like, oh, it's a helicopter flying really low, but it didn't make any noise. It's just that was the thing. It was huge. And for how big it was, it's just so quiet. And we look up, we see this thing. We're like, oh man. And it's just flying slow. Well, just like floating slow, like moving, like we were headed south, and it was kind of moving, it flew like across us like this. And we see it go, and it picks up a little bit of speed. We're like, dude, let's chase this thing. So Ryan hits the gas, and we start following it. And we're driving down these roads, like just cutting in and out of neighborhoods, trying to keep up with this thing. And he's doing a pretty good job at it. You know, it was easy because nobody was on the road. So, you know, we could just take liberties with stop signs and lights. Won't say any more than that. But, yeah, he's doing a really good job of keeping up with it. And we see it flying. And we're not familiar with this area. We don't live here. And, see it flies over a main road. We cross over the main road and cut into another neighborhood, because now it's flying. Here's the main road. It's all neighborhoods on this side. It's flying over across all the neighborhoods. So we hit the next turn, and we're trying to cut through all the neighborhoods, and we take the wrong one and get caught in a cul-de-sac. And we're just like, oh, this is where it ends. This is where it ends. But as we're stopping towards this cul-de-sac, we see this flying thing, stop. And we see it slowly start to descend. I'm like, it's landing over there, but I don't, like, is there any airports around here? I'm like, no, there's no airports. Like what? Okay, like, let's go and try and see, like, if we can figure out, like, the area that it landed. Maybe we can see this thing. So we get back out on the main road. We drive down to the approximate area that we think that this thing landed at, and we get up there, and we come across this. I'm not going to use any names, but we come across this factory. This aeronautical factory. And, you know, at this time, we don't really have smartphones or anything like that, any good ones yet. And, we get home and we look it up. And, yeah, it's definitely an aeronautical factory. And this is all public information. You know, we found this on Google or whatever search engine we used at the time. And they definitely had some government contracts. So we're like, dude, I think we just saw an experimental aircraft. Like, I think they were testing an experimental aircraft, which is kind of odd that they were doing there over a city, but whatever. And then not too long ago, we or not we, me. Not too long. Keep in mind, I'm still friends with these guys to this day. So I'm watching a YouTube video, or maybe it was a TikTok or something like that, and an experimental aircraft pops up, and my mouth drops, and I'm like, I know what that is. That's the exact same thing that we saw. So, yeah, I think we saw, I'm going to mess it up. I think it's a T. I'll add it here in like a little asterisk because I'm sure I'll mess it up. Like a TR3B or something like that. And what it looks like, what we saw is this gigantic black triangle with a circular middle in it. And it's some anti-gravity experimental aircraft. So I was like, dude, I think that's what we saw. So I sent that, and this was just a few months ago. I saw this, maybe in the summer, and I sent that TikTok or video, whatever it was, over to Ryan and Karl, and they were like, that's it. That was what we saw. So I was like, that is pretty cool. Not the scariest story, but still, it is a UFO story, even if it's one with an actual explanation. But yeah. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the stories as much as I enjoyed narrating them. I'm having a lot of fun doing this. Like I said, I saw that there's a very good response to me narrating these stories, because I've been requested to do these, to narrate scary stories forever. Every time I asked, like, hey, what should I add to the channel? Scary camping stories. Telling scary stories while you're out camping. Scary stories being told by the campfire. Which, campfire one will be coming soon. So I was like, alright, you know what? I'll try it. See how people like it. And, yeah, it seems like you guys really liked it. I enjoy doing it. I get to sit in a nice warm tent. And, yeah, it's good. It's good. So I'm going to keep putting out these videos. It might be a winter thing. Might just be a winter thing. Kind of easier videos to do than standing out in the cold. But, there'll be more coming for sure. But, yeah, let me know what you thought of the stories. Let me know what you think of the videos. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell to make sure you're notified when these Hertz Urban videos are dropped, especially if you like these. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, guys. All right, I'm going to wrap it up for tonight and figure out what I'm doing here. So, thank you guys very much for watching. Big shout out to our patrons, our YouTube channel members. Thank you guys for making tonight's video possible. I appreciate you all. Check out the social media. Links are in the description. Links are in the description. That's a hard one to say. And we'll be back very soon with another narration. And soon, a new camping video will be coming. Also, if you're interested in Randonautica, check out the Randonautica channel, that Cursed Urban Randonautica. Link to that will be in the description. But thank you guys for everything. Appreciate you. Have a good night or day, wherever you're at. See you very soon on the next video. Peace out, guys.